I am 28 years old, and I was standing at the altar of the most beautiful church in the city. My dress was perfect. The flowers were perfect. The man standing across from me, Liam, was supposed to be perfect. We had been together for 4 years. He was handsome and charming, and my parents adored him. Everything felt like a dream, a fairy tale that was finally coming true. The organ music faded, and the church fell into a respectful silence. Father Michael, a kind man with gentle eyes who had known my family for years, began the ceremony. His voice was warm and steady, filling the cavernous space with a sense of peace. I looked at Liam, and he smiled at me. It was a dazzling smile, the one that had made me fall in love with him. I felt a surge of pure happiness. This was it. This was the first day of the rest of our lives. We went through the opening rites, the readings, and the homily. My heart was beating so fast I could feel it in my throat. Then came the moment, the exchange of vows. Father Michael turned to Liam first. He cleared his throat and looked directly into Liam's eyes. His expression was not as gentle as it had been moments before. There was a seriousness there, a weight that made the air feel suddenly heavy. I thought he was just adding gravity to the sacred moment. "Before you make your vows to Chloe," Father Michael said, his voice now stern and unwavering, "I must ask you a question. In the sanctity of this house, before God and all these witnesses, is there anything the groom needs to confess?" A collective gasp went through the church. It was so quiet you could hear the rustle of fabric as people shifted in their seats. My smile faltered. I looked at Liam, expecting him to laugh it off, to treat it as a strange theatrical flourish from the priest. But he did not laugh. He did not even smile. And then I saw my groom's face. The color drained from it. His perfect, charming smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. His eyes, which had been sparkling with love just a moment ago, were now wide with a terror I had never seen before. His jaw went slack. He looked like a cornered animal, a boy caught in a lie so immense it was about to swallow him whole. He stared at Father Michael, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. It was a suffocating, terrible silence. My own breath caught in my chest. What was happening? This had to be a joke. A very, very bad joke. I reached out and touched his arm. It was rigid, tense as a steel cable. "Liam?" I whispered. My voice was a tiny, trembling thing. What is he talking about? Liam wouldn't look at me. He kept his terrified gaze locked on the priest. Father Michael did not back down. He stood there like a statue, his eyes boring into Liam, waiting for an answer. The guests were murmuring now, the whispers growing louder, like the buzz of angry bees. My mother, in the front row, looked pale with confusion. My father's hand was gripping the pew in front of him, his knuckles white. "Liam," Father Michael said again, his voice lower this time, but somehow more powerful. "The truth. Now." Liam finally tore his eyes away from the priest and looked at me. The panic in his eyes was mixed with something else now. It was shame. Deep, profound shame. He looked so broken, so utterly defeated. He shook his head slowly, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. He still could not speak. I felt the world tilt on its axis. My perfect day, my perfect life, was shattering into a million tiny pieces right in front of my eyes. The beautiful dream had twisted into a nightmare. I did not know what he had done, but I knew in that instant, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was something unforgivable. I knew that our wedding and our future was over. My father stood up. He walked to the altar with firm, resolute steps. He put a protective arm around my shoulders. "The wedding is off," he announced to the stunned church. His voice was shaking with rage. He turned to Liam. "Get out." Liam flinched as if he had been struck. He looked at me one last time, his eyes pleading. But I had nothing left to give him. I was an empty shell, filled only with a cold, hollow shock. He turned and walked down the aisle, not with the confident stride of a groom, but with the shuffling gait of a condemned man. The guests parted for him, staring at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. I stood there, frozen, as the whispers erupted into a roar of confused chatter. My father guided me away from the altar, away from the hundreds of pairs of eyes that were now fixed on me, the jilted bride. My beautiful wedding dress felt like a lead weight, dragging me down into an abyss of humiliation. The dream was dead, and I had no idea why. We made our way to the small room behind the sanctuary, the one where I had been so happy and excited just an hour before. My mother and my maid of honor, my best friend Sarah, rushed in after us. My mother was crying. Sarah just looked at me with wide, horrified eyes. I sank into a chair, the heavy satin of my dress pooling around me like a shroud. I did not cry. I was too numb, too shocked. My mind kept replaying that one moment over and over again. The priest's question, Liam's face, the sheer terror. What could he have possibly done to earn that look? What secret was so terrible that it had to be revealed at the altar? My father was pacing the room like a caged lion. "I'm going to kill him," he muttered, his hands clenched into fists. "I am going to find him and I am going to kill him." "Robert, please," my mother sobbed, clutching a handkerchief to her mouth. "Not now." Sarah came over and knelt in front of me. She took my hands in hers. They were ice cold. "Chloe," she said softly, "are you okay?" I looked at her, but I could not find the words to answer. Was I okay? No. I felt like my entire world had been a lie. The man I had promised to spend my life with was a stranger with a dark secret. A secret so dark that a priest felt compelled to stop our wedding to demand it be told. Just then, the door to the room burst open. It was Eleanor, Liam's mother. Her face was a mess of smeared makeup and fury. She was not there to comfort me. She was there to attack. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice shrill and accusatory. "What did you say to Father Michael to make him do this?" I was so stunned I could not even react. My father stepped between us. "Get out, Eleanor," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You are not welcome here." "I will not," she spat. "My son is humiliated. Our family is humiliated. This is her fault. She must have done something." She pushed him too hard. She was always so demanding, with her perfect wedding and her perfect plans. "My daughter did nothing," my father roared, his voice echoing in the small room. "Your son is the one who has a confession to make. Your son is the one who turned this day into a circus. Now get out before I have you thrown out." Eleanor looked at me with pure venom in her eyes. It was a look of such hatred that it actually broke through my shock. I felt a flicker of anger. This was not my fault. This was Liam's fault. And hers too, for raising a man who would do whatever it was he had done. "He loves you," she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "And you've ruined him." Then she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The sound reverberated through the room, a final, ugly punctuation mark on the disaster of my wedding day. The anger faded as quickly as it came, replaced by that same cold, empty feeling. Ruined him? No. He had ruined me. He had ruined everything. And I was left alone in the wreckage, with a white dress and 1,000 questions. Liam was gone. He had vanished from the church, and no one knew where he went. The hours that followed were a blur of sympathetic looks, whispered apologies, and the logistical nightmare of dismantling a wedding that never happened. My parents handled most of it, their faces a mixture of grief and fury. My father called the reception venue to cancel. My mother called the guests who were closest to us, her voice breaking with each call. I just sat in my childhood bedroom, still in my wedding dress, staring at the wall. I, Chloe, 28 years old, a woman who had always been a planner, who had a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, had no plan for this. My life had been a straight, predictable line, and it had just veered off a cliff. Liam, the man I had woven into every single one of my future plans, was a ghost. He was not answering his phone. He was not answering his texts. He had simply disappeared, leaving me to face the fallout alone. Sarah stayed with me. She gently helped me out of the heavy dress, a gown that now felt like a costume from a tragedy. She hung it in the back of my closet, a white ghost I never wanted to see again. She made me tea and sat with me in silence, knowing that there were no words that could fix this. Her presence was a small, solid anchor in the swirling storm of my emotions. Late that night, long after my parents had gone to bed, exhausted by the day's emotional toll, there was a soft knock on the front door. I knew it was him. My heart started pounding again, a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. I did not know if I wanted to scream at him or cry. I just knew I needed an answer. I went downstairs and opened the door. There he was, Liam. He looked terrible. His tuxedo was rumpled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were red and swollen. He looked like he had been through a war. He just stood there on the porch, under the dim yellow light, looking at me with a pathetic, pleading expression. "Chloe," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Can I come in?" I should have slammed the door in his face. I should have told him to get lost and never come back. But I could not. The need to understand was too strong. I stepped aside and let him in, leading him into the living room. We sat on opposite ends of the sofa, the space between us feeling like a vast, empty canyon. "Where have you been?" I asked, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Driving," he said. "Just driving. Thinking." "Thinking about what, Liam?" I pressed. "Thinking about the confession you were supposed to make? The one that blew up our entire lives?" He flinched. "Chloe, it was a misunderstanding." I stared at him, my blood running cold. A misunderstanding? After the public humiliation, the terror on his face, the cancellation of our wedding? That was his explanation? I felt a surge of rage so powerful it almost choked me. "A misunderstanding?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You looked like you were about to face a firing squad, Liam. Your mother came and screamed at me, blaming me for everything. And you call it a misunderstanding? What did you do?" "It's not what you think," he said, shaking his head. He tried to move closer to me to take my hand, but I pulled away. "I went to confession with Father Michael yesterday. It's a tradition, you know. Before getting married, I told him I was nervous, that I was scared of the responsibility. He must have taken it the wrong way. He's an old man. He got confused. He put me on the spot, and I panicked." The lie was so blatant, so insulting to my intelligence that I almost laughed. He was trying to gaslight me. He was trying to make me believe that a seasoned priest had completely misinterpreted a simple case of wedding jitters and decided to detonate a wedding over it. "You're lying," I said, the words sharp and clear. "I know you're lying. I saw your face. That wasn't panic from being put on the spot. That was guilt. That was terror. What did you confess, Liam?" "Nothing," he insisted, his voice getting louder. "I confessed nothing. I love you, Chloe. That's all that matters. We can fix this. We can elope. We can go somewhere else and get married tomorrow. Just us. No priests, no family. Just you and me." He was trying to change the subject, to sweep the enormous, gaping wound under the rug with a romantic fantasy. He was not trying to fix the problem. He was trying to hide from it. And he wanted me to hide with him. I stood up. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "Chloe, no, please," he begged, standing up as well. "Don't do this. We love each other." "Love doesn't involve secrets that are so big a priest has to stop a wedding," I shot back. "Love doesn't involve lying to my face 2 seconds after you've humiliated me in front of everyone I've ever known. I need to be alone. I need to think." "What is there to think about?" he asked, his voice desperate. "It's us against the world. Right now it feels like it's just me against you and your secret," I said. "Get out, Liam." He looked at me for a long moment, his face crumbling. He saw that I was not going to back down. He turned and walked to the door, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Before he left, he turned back. "I will make this right," he promised. "I love you." Then he was gone. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it, my legs finally giving out. I slid to the floor and finally, the tears came. I cried for the life I thought I was going to have. I cried for the man I thought I knew. And I cried because I knew, with a sinking certainty, that he was going to keep lying. If I wanted the truth, I was going to have to find it myself. The next few days were a fog of numbness. I went through the motions of life. I woke up. I drank coffee. I stared out the window. The world outside kept moving, but I was stuck, trapped in the wreckage of my wedding day. My parents were wonderfully supportive, giving me space, but also making sure I was eating. Sarah called me every few hours, a lifeline in the suffocating silence. Liam, on the other hand, was relentless. He bombarded me with texts and voicemails, each one a desperate plea for forgiveness, filled with empty promises and flowery declarations of love. He sent a mountain of flowers to my parents' house, which my father promptly threw in the trash. He was trying to create the illusion of a grand romantic gesture, but it all felt hollow. It was all a distraction from the one thing that mattered: the truth. I knew I could not move on until I had answers. The uncertainty was eating me alive. I needed to understand what had happened, not just for closure, but for my own sanity. I had to know if the last 4 years of my life had been a lie. The first step was practical. We had a joint savings account that we had been using for wedding expenses. I needed to close it, to untangle my finances from his as quickly as possible. I logged into my online banking portal, my fingers feeling heavy on the keyboard. I opened the account statement, ready to see the remaining balance and start the process of dividing it up. And that's when I saw it. The anomaly. It was a single line item on the statement, dated 2 days before the wedding. A withdrawal. Not a small one either, $10,000. It was a huge amount, especially since I knew for a fact that all the major vendors had already been paid in full weeks before. The memo attached to the transaction was vague, just 2 words: vendor payment. My blood went cold. I scanned the list of vendors we had used: the caterer, the florist, the photographer, the band. I had copies of all the receipts and contracts in a folder. I had paid every single one of them myself via bank transfer or check. There were no outstanding payments. There was no vendor who was owed $10,000. So where did the money go? My mind flashed back to Liam's face at the altar. The terror, the guilt. This had to be connected. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a case of cold feet. This was something real, something tangible. A $10,000 secret. I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me, cutting through the fog of grief. The hurt was still there, a deep, aching wound in my chest. But now, it was joined by a new feeling: determination. Liam was not going to tell me the truth. His mother was going to cover for him. I was on my own. I took a screenshot of the transaction. This was it. This was the first thread. And I was going to pull on it until the entire ugly tapestry of his lies unraveled. The days of being the grieving bride were over. The investigation had begun. My first call was to Sarah. I explained what I had found, my voice low and steady. I read her the date and the amount of the withdrawal. She was silent for a moment on the other end of the line. "Chloe, that's a lot of money," she said finally. "Are you sure it wasn't for something you forgot about? A security deposit for the venue, maybe?" "No," I said firmly. "I handled all the payments. The venue was paid off months ago. Every single vendor was paid. This money is unaccounted for." "And the memo just says vendor payment?" she asked. "That's it. I confirmed. It's vague on purpose. He didn't want me to know where it really went. There was another pause. I could hear the gears turning in her head. Sarah was the most practical, logical person I knew. She was an accountant, and her mind worked in spreadsheets and balance sheets. Okay, she said, her voice all business now. So he's hiding something financial. That's a start. We need to trace that money. Can you call the bank and ask for the details of the transfer? Who is the recipient? I can try, I said, though I suspected it would not be that easy. It's a joint account, but maybe they'll tell me. I hung up with Sarah and immediately called the bank. I spent 20 frustrating minutes on hold, listening to terrible instrumental music before I finally got a human on the line. I explained the situation, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. I gave the representative the account number and my personal details. I see the transaction you're referring to, ma'am, the woman said politely. A $10,000 wire transfer. Yes, I said, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I need to know the name of the recipient on that transfer. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said, her tone shifting to one of regretful officialdom. Due to privacy policies, I can't disclose the details of the recipient to you without the other account holder's authorization. Since Mr. Liam Hale authorized the transfer, we would need his permission to release that information. Of course, it was a dead end. Liam had covered his tracks. I felt a flash of frustration, but I pushed it down. This was just the first obstacle. There would be other ways. Is there any other information you can give me? I asked. Anything at all? I'm sorry, she repeated. I can only confirm that the funds were transferred successfully. I can't provide any more detail than that. I thanked her and hung up, feeling defeated. So the direct approach was not going to work. I would have to be smarter. I would have to go through Liam. But I could not let him know that I was investigating. I had to play dumb, to pretend I was just a confused, heartbroken fiancé who wanted to understand. I decided to wait for him to contact me again. I did not have to wait long. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from him. Liam. Chloe, please talk to me. I can't eat, I can't sleep. I'm a mess without you. It was the perfect opening. I took a deep breath and typed out a reply, carefully crafting each word. Me. Liam, I'm so confused. My head is spinning. Can we talk? Not about us, about logistics. I need to close the wedding account. Liam. Of course, honey. Anything. I can come over right now. Me. No. Not yet. I'm just looking at the statement online. I'm trying to figure out the final balance. I see a big payment from a few days ago. $10,000. I can't remember what it was for. Do you know? I hit send and held my breath. I watched the 3 little dots appear and disappear as he typed his reply. He was thinking. He was crafting his lie. Liam. Oh, that. Yeah, that was the deposit for the band's sound equipment. The main fee didn't cover their high-end gear, remember? It was a last-minute thing. The lie was so smooth, so plausible. If I had not been the one to handle all the contracts, I might have even believed him. But I knew better. I had the contract with the band saved on my computer. I opened it and double-checked. It stated clearly that all costs, including equipment rental, were included in the final price I had paid a month ago. I felt a cold knot of certainty form in my stomach. He was not just lying. He was a good liar. A practiced liar. He had a story ready to go. This was not his first time doing this. I typed my response, feigning confusion. Me. Oh, that's strange. I thought that was all included. I have the receipt from the band saying we're paid in full. Maybe I should call them and double-check. This was the test. I was calling his bluff. I watched the dots again. This time, they stayed there for a long time. He was panicking. He was trying to figure out a way to backtrack without admitting he had lied. Finally, the reply came. Liam. No, don't do that. You know what? I'm getting confused. It's been a stressful week. You're right, the band was paid. It must have been the florist. For the extra arrangements for the church entrance. They were a special order. My mom handled it. It was supposed to be a surprise for you. Another lie. A more complicated one this time. One that cleverly shifted the responsibility to his mother. He was using Eleanor as a shield. It was a smart move, but it was also a mistake. It told me that she was not just his defender. She was his accomplice. I did not even bother responding. I had what I needed. He was lying, he was squirming, and he was hiding something big. And his mother was in on it. The conversation had given me a new idea. Liam was a closed door, but he had left another one wide open. His old laptop. He had an expensive, new laptop for his work as a marketing consultant. But he always kept his old one in his home office. He called it his project machine, and he was strangely protective of it. I had his apartment key. He had given it to me months ago, a symbol of our shared future. I had never used it without him being there, until now. That evening, I drove to his apartment. The building was quiet. I let myself into his place, my heart pounding with a mixture of guilt and resolve. The apartment was pristine, as always, but it felt cold and impersonal, the home of a stranger. I walked straight to his office. The old laptop was sitting on his desk, closed. I hesitated for a moment. This felt like a massive violation of privacy. But he had violated my trust in the most public and painful way imaginable. I had a right to know why. I opened the laptop. A password screen popped up. I racked my brain, trying to think of what he might use. He was not very creative with passwords. I tried his birthday. No, I tried my birthday. No, I tried our anniversary. No. Then I remembered something from years ago. We were at a park, and a family walked by with a golden retriever puppy. Liam had knelt down to pet it, a rare, unguarded smile on his face. "He looks just like Sparky," he had said wistfully. Sparky was the name of his childhood dog. He had told me stories about that dog, how it was his best friend growing up. My fingers trembled as I typed it in. SPARKY1. The screen unlocked. I was in. I took a deep breath and started searching. I went through his documents first, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Financial spreadsheets that looked normal, old work proposals. Then I opened his email. His personal account was logged in. I started scrolling through his inbox, my eyes scanning for anything unusual. And then I found them. A chain of emails from the last few months with a man named Marcus Thorne. I did not recognize the name. The subject lines were all vaguely ominous. Urgent matter, final payment, deadline approaching. I clicked on the most recent thread. My blood ran cold as I read. Marcus. Liam, I'm not asking again. The deadline was last week. I need the $50K, or our arrangement gets a lot more complicated. You know what's at stake. Liam. Marcus, please, just a little more time. I'm getting married in 2 weeks. After that, everything will be sorted. I promise. I'll have access to the funds I need. Marcus. I don't care about your wedding. I care about my money. You have until the end of the month. That's it. Get me a down payment at least, to show you're serious. $10K. Now. $10,000, the exact amount that had been withdrawn from our joint account. It was a payment to this Marcus person, a down payment on a $50,000 debt. My hands were shaking. What had Liam gotten himself into? Who was this Marcus? And what did he mean by, "I'll have access to the funds I need after the wedding"? My stomach twisted into a sick knot. He was talking about my money. He was talking about my family's money. He was planning to use me to pay off some secret, dangerous debt. I kept digging. I found another email chain, this one between Liam and his mother, Eleanor. It was from a week before the wedding. Eleanor. Liam, you need to handle this situation with that man. It's getting out of hand. You cannot let this interfere with the wedding. Everything is riding on this. Liam. I know, Mom. I'm trying. He's putting a lot of pressure on me. I don't have the money right now. Eleanor. You will, darling, you will. Once you're married, you'll have the resources to make it all go away. Just hold him off a little longer. Chloe doesn't need to be burdened with these silly business worries. She has her perfect day to think about. Just keep smiling and get through the ceremony. Everything will be fine after that. I had to read the email 3 times before I could fully process the words. The casual cruelty of it. The cold, calculated deception. Silly business worries. Keep smiling and get through the ceremony. They were not just hiding a debt from me. They were actively plotting to use my marriage and my finances to solve their problems. Eleanor was not just an enabler. She was a co-conspirator. This was not a mistake. This was a plan. A long-term, deliberate plan to defraud me. The man I was going to marry, the woman who was going to be my mother-in-law, were con artists. And I was their mark. The perfect, trusting, well-off girl who was going to be their salvation. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I closed the laptop, my mind reeling. The shock was gone, replaced by a cold, hard rage. They had underestimated me. They thought I was just a naive girl planning a party. They had no idea who I was. They had no idea what I was capable of. I took out my phone and took pictures of the emails. The conversation with Marcus, the conversation with his mother. I had the proof now. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to know that I was not crazy. Enough to know that I had to fight back. As I let myself out of his apartment and back into the cool night air, I felt a profound shift inside me. The heartbreak was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface. But the dominant feeling was no longer sadness. It was a cold, clear sense of purpose. This was not about getting closure anymore. This was about getting justice. They had tried to ruin my life for their own selfish gain. They were not going to get away with it. The first thing I did the next morning was research the name Marcus Thorne. It did not take long to find him. His online presence was carefully curated, full of pictures of him on yachts and at exclusive events. He presented himself as a venture capitalist, a savvy investor who helped small startups get off the ground. But when I dug a little deeper, past the glossy surface, a much darker picture emerged. I found news articles from a few years back detailing a series of failed tech companies he had been involved with. In each case, the story was the same. The companies would raise a lot of money from investors, burn through it with no actual product to show for it, and then declare bankruptcy, leaving the investors with nothing. There were numerous accusations of fraud and mismanagement, but nothing ever seemed to stick. Marcus Thorne was a shark, an expert at walking the line of legality while leaving a trail of financial destruction in his wake. He was exactly the kind of person a charming but desperate man like Liam would get mixed up with. Liam had always had ambitions that outstripped his abilities. He wanted the lifestyle of a high-flying entrepreneur without putting in the hard work. It was clear now that he had tried to take a shortcut by partnering with Marcus, and it had blown up in his face, leaving him with a $50,000 debt to a very dangerous man. And his solution was not to come clean, to ask for help, or to take responsibility. His solution was to marry me. My family was not fantastically wealthy, but we were comfortable. My parents had worked hard their whole lives, and they had set up a trust fund for me when I was born. It was not a fortune, but it was a significant amount of money, a nest egg for my future. And according to the terms of the trust, I would gain full control of it upon getting married. Liam must have known that. He must have seen me as his golden ticket, his get-out-of-jail-free card. The coldness of the calculation was what hurt the most. Every "I love you," every shared dream, every plan we had made for our future was now tainted. How much of it was real? How much of it was just part of the long con? Was he just an actor, playing the part of the perfect fiancé to get his hands on my money? The thought made me feel sick. I knew I needed more than just a few suspicious emails. If I was going to confront him, I needed an airtight case. I needed to understand the full scope of his deception. The emails mentioned a business deal gone wrong. I needed to find out what that business was. I went back to his laptop. I searched for files related to Marcus Thorne. I found a folder buried deep in his system, cryptically labeled Project X. Inside were business plans, investor presentations, and financial projections for a company called Innovate Futures. It was all very slick and professional, full of buzzwords like synergy and disruptive technology. But when I looked at the actual product they were proposing, some kind of AI-driven personal finance app, it was incredibly vague. There were no technical specifications, no prototype designs, just a lot of fancy graphics and empty promises. It was a classic scam. The most important document in the folder was a list of initial investors. There were about a dozen names, mostly small-time angel investors who had put in between $20,000 and $30,000 each. Their money was the source of the funds that Liam and Marcus had burned through. These people were victims too. And then I saw something that made my breath catch. Near the bottom of the document, there was a section for administrative staff. There was only one name listed, Jenna Petrova, project assistant. This was a lead. A real, human lead. Jenna Petrova had worked for them. She must have seen what was going on. She might know where the money went. She might be willing to talk. Finding her was not easy. Her name was common. I spent hours searching online, going through social media profiles and professional networking sites. Finally, I found a profile that seemed to match. She was based in our city, and her work history listed a short-term contract position at a stealth startup around the time Innovate Futures was active. It had to be her. I hesitated before reaching out. What if she was loyal to Liam? What if she told him I was asking questions? It was a risk. But it was a risk I had to take. I could not move forward without more information. I crafted a careful message, making it sound as non-threatening as possible. Hi, Jenna. My name is Chloe. I know this is random, but I believe you used to work with Liam Hale. I was his fiancée. I'm trying to understand some things about a past business venture of his. I know it's a lot to ask, but would you be willing to speak with me? It would be completely confidential. I just need to understand the truth. I sent the message and then tried to put it out of my mind. It was a long shot. She had no reason to help me. While I waited, Liam's campaign to win me back escalated. He was no longer just texting and calling. He started showing up. He came to my parents' house. But my father met him at the door and told him in no uncertain terms that he was not welcome. He waited for me outside my office, holding a single rose, looking like a sad character in a romantic comedy. I walked right past him without a word. His desperation was making him sloppy. He was so focused on playing the part of the heartbroken lover that he was not thinking about the details. One evening, he ambushed me as I was getting out of my car at home. "Chloe, please, just 5 minutes," he begged, his eyes wide and pleading. "We can't throw away 4 years over one stupid moment of panic." I was tired. I was angry. And I was done with his games. I decided to push him, to see how he would react. "It wasn't a moment of panic, Liam," I said, my voice cold. "It was a secret." "What is Innovate Futures?" His face went completely white. It was the exact same look from the altar. The blood drained from his face and his mouth opened slightly in shock. He was stunned that I knew the name. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. "Don't lie to me," I said, stepping closer to him, my voice low and intense. "I know about the project. I know about Marcus Thorne. And I know you owe him $50,000. What I don't know is why. What happened to all that investor money, Liam?" He looked at me, his mind racing, trying to formulate a new lie. "It was a business deal that went bad," he said, falling back on his old, vague excuse. "It happens all the time in the startup world. It's not a big deal." "It has nothing to do with us." "It has everything to do with us," I shot back, my voice rising. "You took $10,000 from our joint account to pay him off. You were planning on using my trust fund to pay the rest after we were married, weren't you?" He had no answer. He just stared at me, his guilt written all over his face. He was a terrible actor when he was not prepared with a script. That money was for our future, Liam, I said, the heartbreak I had been suppressing finally bubbling to the surface. For our home, for our family, and you were going to steal it to clean up your own mess. He finally found his voice, but it was weak and trembling. I was going to pay you back, he whispered. I swear. Once I got back on my feet. I don't believe you, I said, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. I don't believe anything you say anymore. Stay away from me. Stay away from my family. If you come near me again, I will call the police. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there on the sidewalk, utterly exposed. The confrontation had been draining, but it had also been clarifying. I had seen the truth in his eyes. Every single one of my suspicions was correct. Later that night, as I was trying to calm my racing mind, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. This is Jenna Petrova. I got your message. We need to talk, but not on the phone. Meet me tomorrow, noon, the coffee shop on Elm Street. Come alone. My heart leaped. She had responded. The final pieces of the puzzle were about to fall into place. The coffee shop was a small, quiet place in a part of town I rarely visited. It was the perfect spot for a clandestine meeting. I arrived a few minutes early and chose a booth in the back corner, my back to the wall. I was nervous, my hands fidgeting with my cup of tea. I had no idea what to expect. At noon exactly, a young woman walked in. She looked to be in her mid-20s with dark hair and intelligent, cautious eyes. She scanned the room and her gaze landed on me. She gave a slight nod and walked over to my table. Chloe? She asked softly. Jenna? I replied. She slid into the booth opposite me. She looked even more nervous than I was. She kept glancing towards the door as if she expected someone to follow her. Thank you for meeting me, I began. I know this is strange. It's okay, she said, her voice barely a whisper. When I got your message, I knew I had to talk to you. You deserve to know what you almost walked into. She took a deep breath as if steeling herself. I was the project assistant for Innovate Futures, she started. I was young, just out of college, and I was so excited. Liam and Marcus painted this incredible picture of a revolutionary company. I believed them. She paused and took a sip of water. It didn't take long for me to realize it was all a sham. There was no product. There was no development team. It was just the two of them in a fancy rented office, creating presentations to lure in investors. The money would come in, and it would disappear just as quickly. Where did it go? I asked, leaning forward. Everywhere but the business, she said, a bitter edge to her voice. Liam bought a new sports car. He took his mother on a lavish trip to Europe. Marcus was constantly buying expensive watches and designer clothes. They were living the high life on other people's money. My job was basically to field angry calls from investors who wanted to know where the product was. It was worse than I had imagined. It was not just a failed business. It was deliberate, malicious fraud. What happened in the end? I asked. It all fell apart, of course, Jenna said. The investors started threatening to sue. Marcus, being the snake that he is, managed to shift all the blame onto Liam. He cooked the books to make it look like Liam was the one who had mismanaged all the funds. He told Liam he owed him $50,000, his share of the lost investment, and that if Liam didn't pay up, he would release documents that would not only expose him to the other investors, but could potentially lead to criminal charges. So that was it. Blackmail. Liam was not just in debt. He was being blackmailed by his own partner in crime. Liam was terrified, Jenna continued. He knew he was trapped. That's when he started talking about you. My stomach clenched. What did he say? Jenna looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. He told Marcus not to worry. He said he had a solution to his cash flow problem. He said his fiancée came from a good family and had a trust fund that would unlock as soon as they were married. He said that once he had access to that, paying Marcus off would be easy. I felt the air leave my lungs. Hearing it spelled out so baldly from a third party was like a physical blow. It confirmed my deepest fears. It was all a transaction. I was not a partner. I was an asset. He was so casual about it, Jenna said, her voice filled with disgust. Like he was talking about a business deal. It was sickening. I quit the next day. I couldn't be a part of it anymore. I sat there in silence, absorbing the sheer ugliness of it all. Why are you telling me this now? I asked quietly. Jenna finally looked up at me, and I saw a fire in her eyes. Because they ruined more than just my first job. They took my idealism. They made me cynical. And Liam, he was going to do so much worse to you. He was going to tie you to his crimes, drain your resources, and leave you with nothing. I couldn't let that happen. She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim file folder. She pushed it across the table towards me. I made copies of everything before I left, she said. The real financial records showing the fraudulent expenses, emails between Liam and Marcus where they discussed the scam. I even have a list of all the investors they defrauded. I opened the folder. It was all there. Page after page of damning evidence. Bank statements showing transfers to luxury car dealerships. Receipts from 5-star hotels. It was a complete roadmap of their deception. But Jenna was not done. She took out her phone. There's one more thing, she said. The day I quit, I had a final meeting with Liam. He was trying to convince me to stay, to keep quiet. Marcus wasn't there. Liam got careless. I recorded part of our conversation. She pressed play. I heard the faint sound of office background noise and then a voice. It was Liam's voice, clear as day, but filled with a desperate, wheedling tone I had never heard before. Jenna's voice. Liam, this is wrong. You're stealing from these people. Liam's voice. It's not stealing. It's just creative financing. Look, I'll get it all back. I just need you to hang in there with me. Marcus is putting the screws to me, but I have a plan. Jenna's voice. What plan? More lies? Liam's voice. No, it's a sure thing. Just wait until after the wedding. I'll have access to her trust. I can pay you back double. I can pay everyone back. We just need to get past the wedding. The recording ended. Jenna looked at me, her expression grim. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. The hurt was still there, a deep, permanent scar on my heart. But the anger and confusion had solidified into something hard and sharp. I had it. The key artifact, the undeniable, irrefutable proof, not just of his debt, but of his intent, his cold, calculated plan to use me, my love, and my family's money as the solution to his problems. He said he could pay everyone back, I said, my voice quiet but firm. He was lying, Jenna said. He was just telling me what I wanted to hear so I wouldn't go to the authorities. I know, I said. I looked down at the file folder, at the phone in her hand. This was more than just leverage for a confrontation. This was a weapon. Thank you, Jenna. You have no idea what this means. What are you going to do? She asked, a hint of worry in her voice. I met her gaze, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of my old self return. The planner. The woman with a strategy. He wanted a confession at the altar, I said. I think it's time he gave one. The plan formed in my mind with startling clarity. A simple private confrontation was not enough. He had humiliated me publicly. His downfall needed to be just as public, at least within the circle of people who mattered most. He had tried to use the sanctity of family and marriage to execute his fraud. I would use the very same setting to expose him. I needed an audience. I needed the people whose opinion he and his mother cared about most. I needed our families. I went home and called Liam. He answered on the first ring, his voice filled with a pathetic, hopeful eagerness. Chloe, I'm so glad you called. I knew you'd come around. I miss you so much. I let him talk, my face a mask of stone. I had to play a part now, just as he had for years. I had to be the forgiving fiancé, the woman so blinded by love that she was willing to overlook anything. Liam, I said, injecting a note of hesitant vulnerability into my voice. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I was so angry, and I said things I shouldn't have. No, it's my fault, he said quickly, jumping at the chance to be magnanimous. I should have been honest with you from the start. I was just scared. I didn't want you to think less of me. The lies were so easy for him. It was like breathing. I want to understand, Liam, I continued, following my script. I want to move past this, but I feel like we can't do it alone. I think we need our families. I want to have a dinner at my parents' house. Just us, your mother, my parents, so we can talk everything out, clear the air, and figure out how to move forward together. There was a moment of silence on his end. I could almost hear the triumphant smirk forming on his face. He thought he had won. He thought I was caving, that my love for him had overridden my common sense. He thought this dinner was his victory lap. Chloe, that's a wonderful idea, he said, his voice thick with false emotion. That's so mature of you. Of course. My mom will be thrilled. We can put this all behind us. When do you want to do it? Saturday night, I said. My parents will host. Just be here at 7. We'll be there, he said. I love you, Chloe, more than anything. I'll see you Saturday, I replied, and hung up before I could say something I would regret. I felt dirty, like I needed to wash my hands. Deceiving him even for the right reasons felt unnatural, but it was necessary. It was the only way. Next, I spoke to my parents. I sat them down in their living room and told them everything. I told them about the $10,000 withdrawal, the emails, the shady business partner, the blackmail. I told them about Jenna and the evidence she had given me. I did not play the recording for them yet. I wanted them to see Liam's reaction in real time. My father's face grew darker with every word. My mother had tears in her eyes, not of sadness for the lost relationship, but of fury at the betrayal. That monster, my father growled. He was going to steal from you. From us. I knew there was something wrong with him, my mother said, her voice shaking with anger. And his mother, that woman is pure poison. I've invited them for dinner on Saturday, I said calmly. They both stared at me, aghast. Chloe, why? My mother asked. You can't possibly be thinking of taking him back. No, I said firmly. I'm not. This isn't a reconciliation, it's a reckoning. I'm going to confront them, and I need you both there as witnesses. I need them to face what they've done, not in private where they can lie and manipulate their way out of it, but in front of you. In front of the family they tried to defraud. Understanding dawned on my father's face, followed by a look of grim approval. Good, he said, nodding slowly. He won't be able to squirm his way out of it with us in the room. We'll be right here with you. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I felt like an actress preparing for the role of a lifetime. I went over the plan in my head 100 times. I knew I had to control the conversation, to lead them down a path from which there was no escape. I had to let them think they were in control right up until the very end. Saturday evening arrived. My mother cooked a beautiful meal, the kind she always made for special occasions. The irony was not lost on me. The table was set perfectly. The house was quiet. We were all just waiting. At 7 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I took a deep, steadying breath. I walked to the door and opened it. There they were. Liam and Eleanor. They were dressed up, beaming as if they were arriving for a celebration. Liam was holding a bouquet of roses. Eleanor was carrying a bottle of expensive champagne. They looked so smug, so confident in their victory. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. Chloe, darling, Eleanor trilled, sweeping past me to give my mother a theatrical air kiss. I'm so glad you came to your senses. I knew you two were meant to be. Liam handed me the roses. For you, he said softly, his eyes full of that fake sincerity I now saw so clearly. A new beginning. I took the flowers and gave him a small, tight smile. Thank you, Liam. Come in. Dinner is almost ready. We all sat down at the dining table. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. My parents were polite but distant. Liam and Eleanor, however, were oblivious, chattering away about making new wedding plans. Perhaps a smaller, more intimate affair this time. They were already spending my money in their heads. I let them talk through the first course. I let them build their fantasy, brick by imaginary brick. Then, as my mother cleared the soup bowls, I decided it was time. I folded my hands on the table and looked directly at Liam. Liam, Eleanor? I began, my voice calm and measured. I'm glad you're here. I've been doing some thinking. I think I'm ready to forgive you, Liam. But first, I need the whole truth about why you were in trouble. Eleanor immediately jumped in, her smile unwavering. Oh, Chloe, let's not dwell on that unpleasantness. He wasn't in trouble. It was just wedding nerves. A man is allowed to have a moment of doubt. It's a big commitment. He's right, Chloe, Liam added, reaching for my hand across the table. I let him take it. His skin was cool and clammy. It was just pressure. It meant so much to me marrying you, I got overwhelmed. This was the first part of the trap, the denial. I let them settle into it, let them think their flimsy story was working. I see, I said, nodding slowly. So, it was just nerves. Then what about the $10,000 you took from our joint account 2 days before the wedding? Liam's hand flinched in mine. Eleanor's smile tightened at the edges. They exchanged a brief, panicked glance. Oh, that, Liam said, trying to sound casual. He pulled his hand away to take a sip of water. I told you. It was for the florist, for the extra arrangements. Eleanor, seeing her cue, jumped back in. That's right, it was for a gift for me, a surprise, she said, her voice a little too loud. He was going to surprise me with a beautiful piece of jewelry to thank me for helping with the wedding, but then with all the chaos, he used the money for flowers instead. He's such a thoughtful boy. Their stories were not even matching up now. They were getting sloppy. They were so confident I would believe anything that they were not even bothering to coordinate their lies. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Then I delivered the next blow. A gift? That's not what Marcus Thorne says. The name dropped into the conversation like a bomb. Absolute silence descended on the table. The color drained from Liam's face, leaving him a ghastly shade of pale. Eleanor's jaw dropped, her carefully constructed composure shattering in an instant. They stared at me, their eyes wide with horror and disbelief. They looked like they had seen a ghost. My father, who had been watching the entire exchange with a stony expression, leaned forward slightly. The trap was sprung. I don't know who that is, Liam whispered, his voice shaking. It was the weakest lie he had told yet. You don't? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. I reached for my phone, which I had placed on the table beside my plate. I unlocked the screen and found the audio file Jenna had given me. Maybe this will refresh your memory. I turned up the volume and pressed play. Liam's panicked, wheedling voice filled the silent dining room. Marcus is putting the screws to me, but I have a plan. Eleanor let out a small, strangled gasp. Just wait until after the wedding. I'll have access to her trust. I can pay you back double. I can pay everyone back. We just need to get past the wedding. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier, more damning than any sound could ever be. Liam was frozen, his face a mask of utter devastation. Eleanor looked like she was going to be sick. She stared at her son, then at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. My father stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. He looked at Liam with a contempt so profound it was terrifying. You were going to use my daughter, he said, his voice a low, trembling growl. You were going to steal from my family to pay off a criminal. I did not stop there. I reached for the file folder Jenna had given me and pulled out the printed copies of the bank statements, the ledger of fraudulent expenses. I slid them across the table towards Liam. And this, I said, my voice ringing with cold, hard clarity, is where the investors' money went. A new sports car for you, Liam. A first-class trip to Paris for you, Eleanor. All while you were plotting to use my future, my inheritance, to bail yourselves out of a mess you created with your own greed. Eleanor finally found her voice. It was a pathetic, sputtering whimper. No, it's not true. He wouldn't. It is true, I said, cutting her off. I have spoken to your former project assistant. I have seen the real books. It's all here. The whole sordid little story. Liam just sat there, his head in his hands. He did not even try to deny it. He was broken. He had been so sure of his own charm, so confident in my love for him, that he had never imagined this. He had never imagined that I would be the one to uncover his lies and destroy him with his own words. My father pointed a trembling finger towards the front door. Get out of my house, he said, his voice shaking with a rage I had never heard from him before. Both of you. Now. Eleanor started to sob, a theatrical, self-pitying sound. Liam did not move. He just sat there, a hollowed-out shell of the man I thought I knew. I stood up and walked around the table until I was standing right in front of him. I looked down at his bowed head. The priest asked if you had anything to confess, Liam, I said, my voice clear and steady for everyone to hear. It turns out you did. You just weren't man enough to say it, so I said it for you. He looked up at me then, his eyes swimming with tears of shame and self-pity. He saw no forgiveness in my face. He saw no love. He saw only the woman he had tried to fool, the woman who had just dismantled his entire world. He stood up, stumbling slightly, and followed his weeping mother out of the dining room. A moment later, we heard the front door open and then slam shut. They were gone. The silence they left behind was not heavy or tense. It was clean. It was the quiet after a storm has passed, washing away all the filth and leaving behind a sense of pure, unadulterated relief. I looked at my parents. My mother came over and wrapped her arms around me. My father put his hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and proud. The war was over, and I had won. The days that followed the disastrous dinner were quiet. The storm had passed, and now we were left to assess the damage and rebuild. The first thing I did was call Jenna. I told her what had happened, how I had used the evidence she gave me to expose Liam and his mother. Oh my God, Chloe, she said, her voice a mixture of shock and admiration. You actually did it. You confronted them. I did, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. I played the recording for them in front of my parents. You should have seen their faces. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What happens now? Jenna asked. Now, we make sure they can't do this to anyone else, I replied. Jenna, you have the proof of their fraud. I have the proof of Liam's intent to commit further fraud against me. And you mentioned there were other investors they scammed. I think it's time those people knew the truth. A new strength entered Jenna's voice. You're right, she said. I was scared to come forward before. Marcus is an intimidating person, but knowing what you did, it gives me courage. I still have the contact information for all the other investors. I'll reach out to them. I'll send them the evidence. And she did. Over the next week, Jenna became a warrior. Empowered by my actions, she contacted every single person on that list. She created a group chat and shared the documents I had returned to her. The investors, who had previously been isolated and told different stories, were now united. They saw the full scope of the scam, the deliberate deception. Their anger, which had been simmering for months, finally boiled over. A week later, Jenna called me with an update. They're doing it, she said, her voice buzzing with excitement. They've pooled their resources and hired a lawyer. They're filing a joint lawsuit against both Liam and Marcus for fraud, They want every penny back, plus damages. I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was real justice. This was not just about my personal revenge anymore. It was about holding these men accountable for the lives they had damaged. What about you, Jenna? I asked. Will you be part of it? Yes, she said firmly. I'm not just a witness anymore. I'm a plaintiff. They owe me back pay and damages for wrongful termination. My testimony is going to be central to the case. The legal battle would be long and messy, but the first decisive blow had been struck. Liam's life, which was already in shambles, was about to get infinitely more complicated. The story of the confrontation at the dinner spread through our social circle like wildfire. My parents were not gossips, but the story was too dramatic, too shocking to remain a secret. Liam and Eleanor became pariahs overnight. Friends who had known them for years suddenly stopped returning their calls. They were uninvited from parties and charity events. The perfect, respectable image they had cultivated for so long was shattered, replaced by the ugly truth of their greed and deception. They were social outcasts. One afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Liam's father, Richard. He and Eleanor had been divorced for over a decade, and he lived in another state. I had only met him a few times. He was a quiet, decent man, the complete opposite of his ex-wife. Chloe, he said, his voice heavy with shame. I heard what happened. A friend of the family told me the whole story. I just wanted to call and apologize. For what my son did. For what he tried to do to you and your family. It's not your fault, Richard, I said, surprised by his call. He is my son, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I share in the shame. I don't know what happened to him. Eleanor poisoned his mind with her obsession with money and status. I am so sorry that you were hurt by them. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. It was a moment of decency from a side of the family I had written off as entirely toxic. It reminded me that the world was not just made up of villains like Liam and Eleanor. There were good people, too. My own life began to return to a new kind of normal. I went back to work. I had dinner with Sarah, who listened to the entire story of the confrontation with wide-eyed glee. You're my hero, she declared, raising her wine glass in a toast. You didn't just get mad. You got even. And you got organized. We laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it was a real, genuine laugh, free from the weight of secrets and betrayal. I felt lighter. I had cut a cancer out of my life. The process had been painful, like surgery without anesthesia. But now that it was done, I could finally begin to heal. I changed my phone number to stop the pathetic, pleading voicemails that Liam was still leaving me. I blocked him and his mother on all social media. I erased them from my digital life, just as I was erasing them from my real one. Several months passed. The lawsuit was moving forward, and from what Jenna told me, it was not going well for Liam and Marcus. Their assets were being frozen. Liam had to sell his sports car and move out of his expensive apartment into a small, rundown place on the other side of town. He was drowning in legal fees, with no income and no prospects. The charming, successful man I thought I was marrying had been a complete fabrication, a house of cards built on lies, and it had all come tumbling down. One rainy Saturday morning, I was at a small bakery in my neighborhood, picking up coffee and a pastry. As I was waiting for my order, the door opened and a man walked in, shaking the rain from his coat. It was Father Michael. He saw me and his kind eyes widened in recognition. He walked over to me, a gentle smile on his face. Chloe, he said softly, it's good to see you. How have you been? I'm doing much better, Father, I replied, and I was surprised to find that it was the truth. Thank you. We stood in a slightly awkward silence for a moment. There was so much I wanted to ask him, but I did not know how. He seemed to sense it. I am truly sorry for the pain and humiliation you suffered on that day, he said, his expression full of sincere regret. It was a terrible thing to have to do, and I took no pleasure in it. But a marriage must be built on a foundation of truth. And I could not, in good conscience, let you walk into a union that was based on such a profound lie. How did you know? I asked, the question that had been lingering in the back of my mind for months. What did he say to you in his confession? Father Michael shook his head gently. The seal of the confessional is absolute, my child. I can never repeat what is said in that sacred space. But I can tell you this. Sometimes, a man's sins are so heavy that they cast a shadow on his soul, a shadow that a priest can see. I saw the shadow in Liam's soul. I gave him the chance to bring it into the light himself, to confess to you before making his vows. It was his last chance to choose the path of honesty. My coffee was ready. I took the cup, the warmth seeping into my cold hands. He didn't take it, I said quietly. No, Father Michael agreed. He did not. I prayed for you that day, Chloe. I prayed that you would find the strength to overcome the betrayal. I think your prayers were answered, I said, managing a small smile. Thank you, Father, for everything. You saved me. God saved you, my child, he corrected gently. I was merely the instrument. I left the bakery and walked out into the cool, clean air. The rain had stopped, and the sun was breaking through the clouds. I thought about what Father Michael had said. Liam had gone to confession to unburden himself, to get a fresh start before he shackled me to his lies. He had sought absolution before committing his greatest sin. The irony was staggering. He thought that a few whispered words in a dark booth would wipe his slate clean, allowing him to walk down the aisle and into my trust fund with a clear conscience. But he had miscalculated. He had underestimated the integrity of a good man, a priest who put his duty to the truth above the comfortable performance of a ceremony. Liam's confession was meant to save his soul. Instead, it ended up saving me. It was the catalyst for everything that followed. The single loose thread that, when pulled, unraveled his entire world. He had tried to use a holy sacrament as a tool in his con, and it had backfired in the most spectacular way. He was never punished for his confession. He was punished because he refused to live by it. He was given a final chance to be honest, and he chose to lie. That choice cost him everything. As I walked home, I felt a final sense of peace settle over me. The anger was gone. The hurt had faded to a dull scar. I was not the broken bride left at the altar anymore. I was a survivor. I was the woman who had taken her own life back. Liam had wanted a partner to save him from his mistakes. Instead, he had created the woman who would deliver his penance. And my new beginning was finally, truly my own. My